Welcome to the Speak Pact podcast, where high-performing speakers and the producers who hire them merge to give you the insider secrets to the lucrative speaking industry. Antoniette Roze, your podcast host and celebrated speaker agent, unveils insider success strategies. Discover a nexus of thought leaders and bookers, maximizing your potential in each and every episode. Your ticket to ultimate speaking success begins right here. Catch the transformative insights waiting for you on the Speak Pact podcast, hosted by the industry powerhouse herself, Antoniette Roze.
So thrilled to have a true hero in our midst. We're going to dive into some of his journey and actually what he did with that journey to resonate with a message that he was really passionate about, and it's obviously been gaining huge traction. You've got a huge following. You're doing a lot of good in this world. So Nick Lavery, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Antoniette. I mean, you and I talked about this before you hit the record button. First off, beautiful name. Love the uniqueness and the similarity between that and my wife's name, Tony. So love everything about it. Thank you for having me. It's great to spend some time together.
Yes, and you do. You sound like my cousins, my brothers, my sisters. Just love that accent coming out of you. Okay, so just as a little bit of a background, you were an active duty Green Beret and Army Special Forces guy, right? Warrior. Correct. Out there. How did you and what triggered within you to create a message that you're passionate about, get your voice out there, and really start changing lives in a whole different way than out there on the front lines? I guess it's a different way of being on the front lines, right?
Yeah, it is. It's also very similar in a lot of ways. And, you know, the short answer is I was forced into it. And when I first deployed as an amputee, so after losing my leg and then working my way back to the teams to get back into combat, when I first got back from that first trip as an amputee, I was shoved into this limelight space by senior leaders within our chain of command. And I learned back then very quickly that, you know, when a 4-star general asks you to be a part of something, he's not really asking you anything. You know, I tried to decline politely, and I was told very quickly, yeah, you don't say no to the general. So you will be there and you will do what he's asking of you, and you will do it well. And a lot of that was me just engaging or briefing with different policymakers, different decision makers, different units. And, you know, at the time I had a really hard time understanding that because I had a job to do, and that's as a Green Beret on a Special Forces team, and I did not want to be seen or treated any differently. Mm-hmm. But it was made apparent to me after being forced to do this many, many times that it wasn't about me, and it wasn't about me seeking the spotlight or being starved for attention. It was about the effect that can have on other people that are either dealing with something similar or just dealing with their own set of circumstances or challenges or adversity. And it took a while for that light bulb to go off, but eventually it did. And then once I started to recognize the value of doing it, that gets contagious. So it's ironic because as much as I do it now, it's still wildly outside my comfort zone. I would be more than fine with kind of living in the shadows and living kind of this silent professional lifestyle for forever. But I'm becoming more and more in love with the effect. So it was a very slow transition of leadership, seeing opportunity, seeing value that I could not see yet, and then pushing me into doing it before it was able to see the value for myself.
This journey is, first of all, tragic and fantastic, right? All at the same time, and not to underestimate at all what you went through during that journey. But thank you for sacrificing so much for us, for our nation. That means everything. And what I'd love to convey to our audience, which is predominantly high achievers in an area of their lives, and they're at the stages of their careers where they now want to get their voices out there and really make that next level impact. Right. And so it sounds to me like you had no aspiration or maybe not a predominant aspiration to become a sought after, well-known voice, well-known speaker. So many speakers believe you have to be a natural born speaker, right? You just have to want it. And sometimes the mission far outweighs being comfortable doing that mission. And I'm sure there are many levels that you can speak to with regards to choosing mission over comfort.
Yeah. And, you bring up a great point. And I say this humbly, Antoniette, because I'm thanked and I am applauded when I get off the stage or get done with an engagement. And I hear so often, man, you're such a natural, or, you were born to do this. And these kind of like cliche compliments, which is an honor to receive that. And depending on the scenario and how much time we can invest in that quick dialogue, the truth is that that's completely and totally inaccurate. All right. It's not, it is wrong. In fact, when I was going through my training to become a Green Beret, the one thing that I would get ripped to shreds on by our instructors was my ability to brief, was my ability to get in front of an audience and communicate a point effectively. I was horrible at it because I didn't work at it. And at the time, I didn't think I really needed to do it. I needed to be big and strong and fast and aggressive and be able to smash through doors and shoot accurately with a rifle, and someone else will handle the talking. That was kind of my immature mentality when it came to my profession. And, similarly to me getting kind of pushed into the speaking realm through instructors and great leadership, I realized that that's also wrong. And it was a skill, that's the key word, that I needed to develop. So it very much is a skill. Do I believe talent exists? Absolutely, 100%. Talent is a thing, but this is a skill. And I would also argue that the most talented, naturally gifted speaker, orator, presenter on the planet isn't going to go very far without the development of the skill, which are two different things. And you develop skill one way, and that's through thousands of hours of hammering down on your craft. I think that once you can see it for what it is as a skill, and you treat it the same way you would if you wanted to get good at shooting free throws, it's about the reps, it's about the training, it's about purposeful practice, it's about prioritizing it and getting in the repetition. That is how the skill is developed. And that's what it took for me. So when I committed to wanting to be better at it, man, I had a lot of work to do, and just I've lost track of how many times I've grabbed my spouse and been like, hey, honey, can you just listen just one more time? Like, give me 10 more minutes, talking to her, talking to myself in the mirror, talking to the windshield as I'm driving, just getting in the reps, and then having that hard, candid, somewhat painful look back at what you've done, and then dive into the science and the art and tweak it and just keep going and going and going.
You bring up such an important piece of information. Then you're a sought after speaker to the point where you are now trying to multiply yourself, because you can't, there's only one Nick Lavery, right? You can only be in one place at one time. Well, now with AI and all the things, but really, actually, your human body can only be in one place at one time. Mm-hmm. But what I love what you said is, no matter where you reach in your journey, there is always that next horizon, that next place that you can get to. So I truly believe that the greatest speaker is the greatest student, right? You're always going that next level. And maybe there is some natural talent in there. Maybe you have such a compelling message that even if you kind of half deliver it, it's going to resonate with some people in the audience. But why not go full force, right? And why not go the full journey? So what are some things you did to take yourself from Nick Lavery with an amazing message to Nick Lavery, very sought after speaker? Because it goes beyond, it transcends beyond the message to the connection. You're now really connecting to people. Did you read? Did you watch YouTube videos? Did you get some coaching? What did you do for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, all the above. I haven't received any kind of formal coaching, but I dove into research, books, YouTube, audiobooks, you name it. I was just consuming just different knowledge. And while I do think that certainly helps, I also kind of think it's similar to parenthood, where you can equip yourself with all these lessons learned and do's and don'ts, but like, you just got to get out there and start figuring it out for yourself, because you're your own asset. You are your own weapon, and you have different strengths and weaknesses and gaps. So you can take the general knowledge, but you got to put it into practice and find your own voice and your own message. And I can tell you, one of the more challenging things was, quote unquote, my story, or at least like certain parts of my story, are a bit overwhelming for some to even be able to comprehend. You're talking about like movie style, like action that's going on with explosions and gunfire and losing limbs and, getting yourself back into the fight and all these things. And it can be really difficult to take those experiences and effectively put that into the brains and minds of somebody else who's never experienced anything remotely close to that, never wants to, never will, no desire to. There can be a disconnect. And one of the greatest pieces of advice I consumed was, your job as a speaker isn't to tell your story. Your job as a speaker is to use your story within somebody else's story, meaning that you take your message, but you have to make it translatable to the audience's story, whether that's one person or a room full of 10,000 people. That's your job as a professional speaker. You use your story to connect to their story. Well, with me, that can be hard because it's just such an over-the-top story. So I had to get pretty creative and do a lot of reflection and analysis into, well, what are the common themes here? What are the themes that you see within higher performers, or those that have ambition, those that are striving towards a monster goal, those that want to accomplish something or become something, etc.? What are the themes? What at the bare bone minimum? Forget the specifics. What are the common themes? And start tugging on those threads, and then start connecting the lines. Because when you do that, the commonalities are quite obvious. Certainly within certain demographics like military special operations and professional athletics. I mean, they're more similar than they are different. But these exact themes exist across all sectors and aspects of life, regardless of what the person may be trying to do or become. There are these non-negotiables that are going to exist. And you start making the connection, though that's the bridge between your circumstance and the message into that person's brain.
Such an important theme, right? I'm never going to, unless God or the universe like really shakes some things up, I am never going to be on a front line where I'm faced with that kind of action, right? But I've faced action in my life on my own levels. And if you can create that through line between your experiences and mine, even though it's very different, I can understand doing it scared, right? I can understand doing it when I don't maybe feel completely prepared, and just getting out there and doing it for the greater good. Tell me a little bit about when you use your story to connect with your audience. What are you thinking? Because you know that probably at least 90% of those bottoms in seats right in front of you are never going to experience the extremes that you did. How do you remember when you were them, right before you had the experiences that you did?
Yeah, one of the things, and this took a while, it's still a work in progress, is the importance of humanizing myself, because it's very easy for an individual that doesn't come from this lifestyle, which is the overwhelming majority of the people on this planet, to look at me or listen to me or see me somewhere and put me on this self-created pedestal of this supernatural being. And therefore the challenge becomes increased, because now I have to get over that hurdle. Whereas if I'm talking about the importance of discipline or work ethic or whatever the message is, if a person has already put me on this cut from a different cloth pedestal, well, then that creates a barrier between their ability to accept that as an option for them, because they're not me, saying, you're like this superhero comic book creature, so of course you're able to do this, but I'm me. I'm not you. I've never done anything like this. I have no idea. That I'm just kind of listening to this whole, oh my gosh, story, so that it's difficult to relate it. So humanizing myself has been incredibly important. And that took a while, because initially I I'm going to come over the top and I'm just going to smash people in the face with this, like, oh my gosh, story. And it's going to be so impactful that people are going to be so emotionally charged, crying, scared, all the things. And then I'm going to be able to deliver my message. And then I realized that there was this barrier. So I've had to find, unique and creative ways to humanize myself. And a couple of the ways that I do that is I talk a lot about my family, because that's something that most people can relate to, whether you have a spouse and children or not. Most do, at least in our typical target audience. So that's something that most people can relate to. I talk about the challenges at home. I talk about, messing it up as a dad, as a spouse. And, when I take off my military uniform, when the plate carrier and the rifle goes back, and I wash all the debris and dust off my face from whatever I'm doing for work, I come home and I'm dad, I'm husband. I've got everyday responsibilities in my home that aren't going away. And those are the same challenges that all of us deal with. And then the second tool that I've started to leverage and play around with more is just humor, just breaking the ice and smiling, just being an open, somewhat vulnerable, humorous, like take things lightly. So interject these moments of levity in some of these holy shit type stories where it catches people off guard, but you can feel the energy in the room. Everyone kind of like takes a breath and they see me and I'm smiling and I'm laughing at myself. And it's like, okay, cool. It's like a moment people can kind of like get back to earth because they've been in this mythical land for however long I've been talking. So humanizing myself has been important. And then again, a couple ways to do that is the importance of my family, which is easy because they are at the absolute core of why I do what I do. Not only that, but how I do what I do. So that's very simple for me. And then layering some humor into the presentation and taking off some of this rough exterior so people can see that I'm a human being just like them.
Fabulous advice. This is probably so much harder to do than it sounds, right? Because it's easy to get caught up in your own head and what your message, that mission you really want to get out there, that you can easily forget that the importance of empathy, the importance of vulnerability, and just that human touch, right? That human connection and humor, right? You almost, especially the heavier the topic, the more you've got to infuse those breaks, right? Those moments of relief in there, because people can't handle from what I've seen with the speakers I've worked with and with my own speaking journey, the last thing you want is, number one, your audience to feel sorry for you, be so emotionalized that they completely miss the message. And you have somehow along the way caught that and been able to share the heavy stuff, right? Share that heavy stuff while weaving in the humanity, the humor, and those light pieces. So that takes exactly what you said. It takes doing it, right? We don't become, there's no one book you can read or one course you can take. It's collecting that data while you're out there on the stage. What are my strengths? What are people leaning into? What is just jam blasting people that I just lose them because they can't handle the reality, right, of what you went through. So that came through just your journey of getting out there and doing it time after time after time. And so what was the bridge between your superiors telling you you're going to get out there and talk, right? And then 3 years ago when you decided to become a brand of your own, get your voice out there in the way you wanted to get your voice out there. And it's definitely struck a chord, right? Because you have a huge following. You travel all over the place to the point where you've got to duplicate yourself because you just can't do it all. Like, how did you make that jump?
Yeah, I'd say once I committed to making this a real thing, I approached it like I would approach a military operation. And it was, all right, it's going to begin with deliberate preparation. Okay, so I got to develop a training plan here to sharpen my skill. Once I got that to a point where I feel like I was ready to send it, then it's a grind. And, the tapping into your own network. Hey man, I'm trying to give it this speaking thing, a shot here. I know you run a small team within this organization. Can I get 30 minutes with some of your people? I'll get myself there. I'll take care of myself. It's entirely on me. I knew I needed the live reps. And while training is important in your, mirror in your bathroom, live reps are equally, if not more important. There's a reason why in athletics, we do scrimmages, like you practice as a team and then you do some scrimmages prior to the season starting, because that's an entirely different type of training. So I knew I needed to get those, and it's just a grind. You're hitting people up, you're tapping into that network and say, you know a guy, a girl, an organization maybe, and you just kind of hit the pavement, and you got to make those investments in yourself. I'm talking time, money, energy, like that's what it takes. And I did that for a good 8-9 months of just out of pocket, cold calling, cold bumping, cold DMing, exhausting my personal network and then going off of that and looking for referrals, and just, it's the grind, and it's like the thing you hear most people talk about at the beginning of their journey, whether you're talking about, Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Michael Jordan. It's like, that's the game, man. And you got to really want it because it's really hot, and you're going to get a lot of doors slammed in your face, and you're going to be told no, and you're going to get these little wins along the way and think like, I've made it. And then you fall off the cliff and you're back at phase 0 again. And you just got to stay in the game. And then, then you start to sharpen your skill enough, and, that word of mouth starts to happen where all of a sudden, boom, like someone just comes out of the blue, whether it's through social media or through an email or whatever, and saying, hey, I talked to so-and-so. They said you did a great job. I'd love to get you to come talk to some of my people. And like, boom. And now you're off and running.
This is exactly what separates the speakers who really make a brand for themselves, make a name for themselves, make a whole career for themselves, and those who say they tried and it just wasn't in the cards, right? It just didn't work. Then the average speaker doesn't like to hear this, right? They already paid their dues in some form of expertise, and they know what they have to offer. But that doesn't translate to the public already trusting you, to speaker bookers or organizers already trusting you, right? It is that just repetitive action. And I love that you said that. Tony Robbins himself, it took him 10 years. I'm glad it only took you 9 months, like fabulous, right? But it took him 10 years of that grind to start getting the gigs. And then 2 more years before people began recognizing his name. But look where it got him. So that speaker, if you really do have a message and you understand your who behind your message, the why is great, but you really need to understand whose life is it that this message is going to resonate with and hopefully transform in a positive way. When it's more about them, then I think you're willing to put in those reps, right? Put that in there. And when it just doesn't look like it's going to be happening, you just keep doing it. And then all of a sudden things start breaking open. So what was it? At what point, I always tell my speakers, there's a lot of forward movement until all of a sudden we're fielding the requests to have you on stage. At what point did you start feeling that shift?
I started feeling that. Objectively noticing that now, I don't know, 2.5-ish, more like 2 years ago or so. So about a year of grinding on the pavement before the kind of first tranche of, hey, we think we may want you here. And I also got to make it very clear that that's not like I've hit the jackpot. That's just people are now asking you if you'll come do what you've already done for nothing with whomever they've talked to. So that's a whole not, well, I'm not even talking like getting into like when and how do you monetize something. This is just that shift of being proactive and hunting for opportunity and then having some start to come in. That was about a year after I had just hit the pavement and kept going. And what I will tell you just on that topic is the first means of compensation that I began asking for was for video content. And that came as the result of when I maybe 3-4 months into this, I'm like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to reach out to all these different speakers bureaus. I'm going to get on into their stable, and then they're just going to go ahead and book me, like as if that's the way that worked. So quick story, I reached out to 10 of them, 10 speakers bureaus. Out of the 10, 5 actually responded. Out of those 5, I want to say it was 3 that said, hey, we'll take a look at your resume, but it's going to cost you like $2,500. Or like I had to pay to get them to even look at who I am and what I do. Well, I have no money. This isn't even a thing. I'm like, that's not an option. 1 out of the 10 was actually the founder of the company responded. And he said, hey man, I'm a huge supporter of the military. I'd love to get on a call. And I'm like, here it is. This is it. I've made it. So I get on a call with this guy. I can't remember his name. I could look it up, I'm sure. And he goes, hey man, listen, I'm taking this call just out of respect for what you do. Thank you for your service. I'm telling you right now, man, like no speakers bureau is just going to take on some like random person. Doesn't matter how compelling of a resume you put together or what you've been through. We find you. That's how this works. So what you need to focus on, his recommendation was you got to put together your resume, but it's done digitally, meaning through video, photo, marketing, content. You have to get it out there. That is how people are going to find you and want you. He's like, so stay on the grind. Don't ask for anything from anybody yet. You still need to develop your skill. But once you feel like you've actually got some legit value, your next ask is, hey, no compensation, no payment, but can you get some cameras rolling? Can I get that footage from you? That was the next evolution. And I did that for like 4, 5, 6 months. And that began to put together that pedigree, that resume that was externally, outwardly facing. That was a massive catalyst because once you've got a good stockpile of footage of the things you've done, you got the teaser reels, or you just even have the raw. It almost doesn't matter initially what it is. You're not going to have the budget almost certainly to hire, a $5,000 video production to create one 90-second reel. It's just more about the volume and people can get a feel for what you do. Once I committed to that, that certainly opened up the floodgates. And then you keep going around and around you go.
Ah, yes. Okay. So established speakers understand this. And I love that you brought this up because maybe the newer voices, and I'm talking high performers, right? Maybe former athletes or former CEOs, people who have really accomplished a lot in their lives. I have speakers, doctors, right? Who now want to utilize their voices to speak. These are people who assume they've already paid their dues. And now, of course, everybody's going to want to hear their message. And that's not the way that it works. And you somehow understood that, or at least you just weren't going to take no for an answer, right? You went ahead and had that tenacity to receive kudos to that bureau. But I love that you saw that there was no one agent or agency, there was no bureau that was going to do it with you. It had to be a partnership, right? I definitely encourage, as you know, I'm an agent and I have an agency, but I will flat out say no to the speaker who basically wants everything done for them because it doesn't work that way. Sure. I mean, maybe if you want 2 to 4 talks in a year, but if you're wanting those 2 to 3 talks in a month, it's a partnership. And get into the driver's seat, right? Get in your own driver's seat as a speaker and an impact maker. So love that you recognize that and you went for it.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say that one of the most translatable skills from my work as a special operator into speaking is the resilience that's required to do it, because it's really hard. You're going to get told no. You're going to have moments of awkward pauses and you get done and you totally botch a presentation. And it's just taking those lumps to the chin over and over and over again and seeing each one as an opportunity to learn. And that's really what I've extracted, I think, most from my almost 2 decades as a warfighter is you're going to get it wrong a whole bunch. In fact, that's actually kind of part of the point of training. We're going to get it wrong so many times here that when it comes time to do live, we're going to get it right. And, but that comes at a cost. It's easier said than done because it hurts. It hurts your pride, hurts the ego, right? You're investing time, money, energy. It's just an absolute beating. But can you stay in the game long enough to harness your skill and then get it out there? And then once that starts to crest, then you start to reap some of the benefits. But it's a never-ending journey, because now you got to level up again and you got to find that next category and you want to hit that next, price point, and you want to hit that next market. And it's this commitment to this never-ending journey of perfection that we are constantly striving for while knowing we're never going to reach it.
As soon as you feel like you've arrived, you become irrelevant, right? You're exactly right, right? You reach a new summit, you see the next summit, and you get back to those foundations. Who is Nick Lavery? What am I about? Who do I want to reach now with all this data collecting I've been doing these last several years, right? And as your message evolves, as your career evolve, you and your family dynamic, your life dynamic evolves. And it's going back to those foundations. What are my non-negotiables? What am I willing to do? What am I willing to get out there and do? And that really brings me to some of the work that you're now doing to multiply yourself, to train the trainers, right? And your company, Precision Components, do I have that right? Tell me a little bit about that. What are you doing now to get that message out there further than Nick Lavery can do on his own?
Yeah. So, we talked about this earlier. There's a limit to what I can do myself, whether it's in person or virtual. There's a cap to that. And if you have ambitions to start a movement and to create wide spectrum change and enable tens or thousands of millions of people, there's a need to scale at a certain point. And, in person versus virtual, there's clearly a difference in the impact and the energy and the effect. So we knew, this was probably a year or two ago, that we're going to need more speakers at some point. So how do we go about doing that? And, it was very small, kind of just keeping your eyes open and finding these young up and coming. When I say young, I don't necessarily mean age. I mean young to the industry.
Emerging. Yep.
Yeah. Emerging, hungry, awesome. That's what I'm looking for. That's what me and my team are looking for. And then from there, awesome. What's the message? It doesn't need to be presented even half decent at this point, but are you hungry? Are you passionate about it? And what's the message behind it? Because we can work to build this into what you want it to be. And one of the ways that we've gone about doing that is, if I've got an event or an engagement, and as long as there's enough time allotted with the duration, then I'll bring in another one of our team members, one of our up and coming assets, and give them 10 minutes, give him or her 15 minutes. It could be the open, it could be post, the first break. We factor it in, and this is all, of course, assuming the client is okay with it. But as long as we do our job right and we line them up effectively, it works. We've actually never been told no, and sometimes we've already had it booked. We just want Nick Lavery for 2 hours, and then Sydney, director of engagements, will come back and say, hey, can we get an extra 15? You'll still get Nick for the 2, but can we get an extra 15? Because, our other speaker, Ben, he's got a really impactful message. I think it fits great within your need. And yeah, absolutely. We're just getting more bang for the buck. Perfect. So that's how we kind of slowly started to integrate these different speakers and instructors into the demand that was based entirely on people wanting me. And then once you do that enough, then they start to get a little name for themselves. They start to get some content. They start to put that on their own brand. And now it's a true team dynamic where more eyeballs on them, more eyeballs on us, funneling back to them. And as the demand continues to come in and we say, hey, Nick's busy, but we want to send you Ben. And they're like, I have no idea who the hell Ben is. You can do a quick look and say, oh, this is Ben. Actually, you know what? He may be a better fit for us than Nick. That's outstanding. And at a fraction of the cost. And you just kind of keep cultivating that team dynamic has been our approach. And it's worked. It's been very successful in terms of the scale, but I can just tell you from a personal level, spending now probably even more time inwardly facing to my team and aspiring hungry speaker instructors as I do client facing has been very rewarding and fulfilling. And I think you and I talked about this before you hit record, kind of downstream looking, 3, 4, 5 years out. I think that's probably where I'll spend more of my speaking time is going to be that train the trainer model. And then, I'll go on target when it requires me to go on target.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I would like to dive in to that revenue journey just a little bit more. So you went from being told you have to speak whether you like it or not, to you deciding to speak and doing it for free and doing it however you could get your voice and your message out there. Yeah. When did you find the opening to begin charging for your talks? And I know early on, you and I talked, early on, you were actually licensing some of your IP and getting it out that way. can you take us on the journey of the evolution of your monetization strategy from when you first got your very first check and how you did that to where you're at now and what you're looking at in the next year or 2 years?
I love this story because it's such a double-edged, bittersweet story. So the quick version is a friend of a friend, actually a friend of my wife, worked at the University of Wisconsin in the athletic department. And he had seen some of my stuff. He knows her. He's like, hey, would Nick be willing to come to Madison, Wisconsin and talk to some of the Badgers, which is their sports teams? And I'm like, absolutely amazing. Totally on me. No ask of you whatsoever. This is great. Can I bring one of my friends? Actually, it was my cousin with an iPhone. He's like, yeah, no problem. So we went, I talked to the basketball teams, hockey, a couple of the groups in a couple different settings. Amazing. Well, as a result of that, this individual, he used to come from finance. He let some of his friends know that this guy, Nick, was coming, this one-legged Green Beret, over at Northwestern Mutual, which is a massive financial institution. So they reach out and they say, hey, this is before I was going. They said, hey, we hear you're going to be down the street from us. Would you like to come over and talk to our people? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Yeah, absolutely. So I just respond. I said, yeah, great. If the dates line up, perfect. And then their response to that was, great. What's your rate? That was the very first time anyone had ever asked me that, or I'd ever even broached the subject of being paid to do this. So it's like this moment where everything stops and you're like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, what do I do with my hands right now? This is like a whole new thing. So I hit up Mike, who's their friend, Badger guy. And I'm like, dude, he's like, yeah, tell him whatever. It's like, they're a massive company. This is what they do. So like, whatever you're comfortable with. He didn't give me a whole lot of advice. He just said like, throw something out there. So I'm like, all right, fine. I did. So I said, my response was $1,000 for a 60-minute keynote. And they, of course, respond and they're like, yeah, done. And so the response came so fast that I was like, damn it, I probably left some money on the table there. But who cares? This is like a huge win. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to go grab my wife and pick her up and give her a kiss, and we're going to celebrate. Great day. Well, as it would turn out, and I take responsibility, however, this was all happening without me knowing, the dates were messed up. Whereas the Northwestern thing was actually the following week. So I had already done, I completely missed it. Actually, Northwestern was supposed to be before Badgers. So they hit me up. Hey, like, where are you? And I'm home. And I get an email saying like, you're supposed to be here in like 20 minutes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this just happened. They had already sent the check. So I missed the engagement. The check shows up. I email them. I say, I got this check. I just want to let your accounting department know. I tore it up. I voided out. Not going to happen. They're like, yeah, no problem. Thanks. Appreciate it. No big deal. Like scheduling doesn't happen. So point here, I got my first paid opportunity. Very scary. Throw a number out there. No idea how it's going to land. It lands. Everybody wins. Then I completely miss the engagement and I have to return the money. That was my first time monetizing this. But I can't tell you that it was like 2-3 weeks later, another division of Northwestern Mutual reached out and said, hey, we heard you were supposed to be in Madison. We're in Michigan, I think it was. Will you come talk to our people? And we heard like some of the things you do and how great you've been and all these things. So I was able to do that. And then eventually a year later, I went and saw the guys that I was originally supposed to see. And that was kind of the initiation of the whole monetization thing. It's a very awkward, challenging thing to do. And I can tell you, and you know this, Antoniette, because you represent people, when you get to a place where you have representation, which is likely not going to be out of the gate, that's also a massive catalyst in the growth of the business offering that you have. Because you as the artist, you just want to do it. You love your passion. You just want to do the thing. Whereas if you've got someone that's got a much more objective position to take, then they can do those things for you. I was in a place where I could do that. That was a huge trigger moment where we started to see the numbers just absolutely skyrocket.
Ah, wow. That is like, what's the worst that could go wrong, right? Missing your first paid engagement. That's fabulous. And you survived, right? And you became, I'm sure you charge a whole lot more than $1,000 these days. Yeah. So you didn't give up. You didn't say, oh, you learned. And I'm sure you kept a tighter calendar from that. You just learn, pivot, and keep going. Tell me a little bit about, I know by this time our audience is wanting to know, how do we get a hold of you? What are the best ways? And also a good number of agents and and corporations looking for speakers come to the show. So how do they find you?
Yeah, easy. The one-stop shop is our website. It's teammachine.com. Machine is spelled MCHN. That's got links to all the products and to get a hold of my team for scheduling and all the social media links and YouTube and all the things. One-stop shop. There it is.
Okay. So team, for those who are binge listening and don't have a pen out, it's team. And then MCHN machine.
Correct.
.com. Okay.
There it is.
Simple enough. That's fabulous. All right. And so at what point did you decide to sell your IP, or I guess license your IP? And how did that go? How'd that work for you?
That was actually, I want to say, the first business-like thing that we did when me and my partners decided to figure out what this thing even was. And it was done through merchandise. And the first company we did this with, which is actually our longest standing partnership, and we've done a whole bunch of different projects together, is a company called Gym Reapers. And they make training equipment and apparel, which is right in line with, kind of my lifestyle. So it was great. So we started off as kind of your basic kind of brand ambassador, sponsored athlete kind of arrangement. And then they proposed like, hey, why don't we do like some collaborative products here where we use your image, your brand as on product. And my first thought was, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I know you guys, I trust you guys. Awesome. There was no like paperwork involved. It was just like, cool. What do you need from me? Like, here's some images and some stuff. And their design team went and created it. And we did that way for, 6-8 months. And at some point, once this became more legitimate, and I bring in some of my current team members now, they're like, we got to kind of like make this formal, because we're just kind of flying around here, making like weird offhanded decisions that we want like some protection. So then we, kind of went backwards in time and tightened things up. So it actually started that way through my image and likeness and with some of our branding and patented designs. And it's something that we still do now, but we're very selective on who we do that stuff with. Like in today's social media world, most up and coming brands and companies are trying to get, the likes and the follows and the attention through other means, through the influencer kind of market. And we don't really have much of an interest in doing that or turning, my Instagram into just a rotating billboard. So we're very selective on who we choose to do these kinds of agreements with. And I'll tell you what the strategy is. One is it a product or service that I believe in, that I use myself, or I would use myself because it works and I believe that it provides value to people? And then if the answer to that is yes, great. Now tell me about the people behind the brand, because that's almost what I care about more than the product itself. Is tell me about you. Tell me about your vision, your values, your mission, where you're taking this. And if both of those things line up and we've got room for it within the slate, then, we take a closer look at it.
Love it. And you've earned this spot. You've earned the spot to get choosy. And that took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and tenacity, really, to get to this place. So one last question before the signature question for you. So you brought in the book, Objective Secure. And I know you talk about unlocking capacity, increasing capability. What role did the book play in your speaking career? And at what point did you decide, I'm going to write a book?
Love this. I'm so glad you brought this up. This shows how good you are, Antoniette, because I would have totally missed this. And it's such a significant part of this. The reason why the book was created was because my longtime best friend, we were college roommates together. We played football in college together. He's now my business partner. He reached out to me randomly and said, I think you need to write a book. And I wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, I hung up on him. True story. I was down in Key West going through the combat diver qualification course, which is a brutal school. He called me then with this idea. I hung up on him and didn't want to talk to him again. Once I got back home, we got on another call. I had kind of got to a better place mentally, where I wasn't totally beat down, and I entertained his pitch that he threw at me, gave it some thought, and it probably still wouldn't have happened had it not been July of 2020, while we're all locked in our homes, the gyms are closed, the fight houses are closed, like we're all dealing with that era of time, right? So I had this massive bandwidth that I had at my disposal that I needed to interject somewhere. and writing a book became the thing. So if it wasn't for both of those things, a good buddy of mine whose opinion I respect, and a pandemic, I don't know if the book would even exist
Perfect
today.
storm.
Yeah, there's the perfect storm, and you see opportunity and you're like, I'm going to do something positive with this disaster we're dealing with. And like, that's what ended up being it for me. After that got created, that became our first kind of major stake in the ground in January of 2021 when it was published, which is where I consider to be kind of the true operational launch of our business. It started with Objective Secure. And one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got from a colleague who's written several books was, you don't write a book to make money. You write a book for the credibility that it brings you, and then you monetize the credibility. And it just floored me when he said that, because making money off of the book has never been part of the reason why I wrote it. I wanted to share the knowledge with the world. And if it made a single dollar, I would have been like, okay, cool. It's of course like crazy now when I get like our monthly distributions. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are actually buying this thing. Like, it still shocks me. And it's been, almost 4 years. But that piece of advice I think is very important for the aspiring speaker. And I don't think that means you just write a book full of like nonsense just so you could say you're an author. I think that would be a mistake, because that would fail to give you any credibility. So I would say it's important that it's done right, and it's something that you care about, and you invest yourself in that project, knowing going in that it's really hard. Writing a book is a monster challenge. Some of these authors that bang out like a book a year, I'm like, how do you do this? I have no idea. It took me a lot of time and effort. It was really difficult, but I do agree with that strategy if you choose to go that route. And I can tell you that having that flag in the ground it does do that. It gives people a sense of comfort and trust, and it also gives them a reference. They can take a quick look to get an idea of who I am, what I'm about. They don't necessarily need to read the whole thing, but it's out there, and you can use that credibility to then drive your aspiring speaker profession.
Yes, I love that quote that your mentor, your friend gave you, because it's just spot on, right? That's the power of a book. It hurts my heart when somebody thinks they're going to write a book and it's going to pay their bills, because that's not how it works. The opportunities that open up to you from that book can pay your bills, right? But it's not necessarily the sale of the book. So just understanding that little bit of different mindset makes all the difference. So love that you leveraged this book. I actually skimmed through it online, and there's a lot of goodness in there. I highly recommend going and checking out Objective Secure, because there's just, you can't walk away without some transformation pieces. So speaking of transformation pieces, that the show is Speak Pact. And from a backstory of my own, I am on a mission to make a pact with you, with our audience, to make the biggest impact that you can in this life and in this world. And in my world, that's through the power of your voice. What are some one or two tactical things that an emerging voice can do that's doable, right? And really begin gaining that traction in their own message and career?
Oh, tactical. See, I love this because, I don't say it's easy, but you can play around in the kind of conceptual, theoretical, operational realm for a while. But like, let's get down and let's get dirty, right? Let's get into the dirt here for a second as we close this thing out. Love this question. I'll tell you a tactic that I learned that I challenge the speakers that I get to mentor now to do. I'd say challenge, but I kind of make them do it. Like, I was made to do a lot of different things. Like, no, you're going to do this because it's going to work. And it's a 20-minute investment, which is why this is brilliant. If you say you want to make this real, you want to make a real run at this, but you don't have the time for this exercise, then that's just an indicator that you really don't want this the way you may be telling yourself you do, because it's a very short time investment. It's a 20-minute exercise. So what it is, you film yourself doing a 5-minute presentation. Ideally, you can get maybe more of your body. So someone's holding it while you may be like working a room. It doesn't matter where you are. You can be in a living room. You can be in your backyard. It doesn't matter. Even if it's just like a webcam like this, it'll still work. But the more of you that replicates you speaking in front of a group, the better. 5-minute presentation. Almost actually entirely doesn't really matter what it's about. I would say ideally it's about something that you actually want to talk about, but really it's just about presenting for 5 minutes. That's a 5-minute investment. Then you're going to go back and you are going to watch the footage without any sound on. So you're just looking at your body language and the way you move and your hand placement. There's no audio at all, and you're taking notes on what you're seeing. Now you're at 10 minutes. Now you're going to go back and watch it again and just listen to it. So you're just going to listen to the narration. You're not going to look at it. You're just going to hit on, put the camera down, take notes on what you hear. And then now you're at 15 minutes. And now the last is you have it transcribed, or you get one of these like captions apps where you can download it real quick, and then boom, it puts out the actual transcription so you can read it. So within a 20-minute exercise, you have 5 minutes of delivery. Then you've got 3 separate means of analyzing what you've done: visually, audibly, and then reading it. You do that 2-3 times a week on that same 5-minute presentation. Within 2 weeks, at a month at most, that 5 minutes is going to be absolute gold. You will nail your timing, your tonality, your pauses, your hand gestures. That 5 minutes will be locked in where you could deliver it in your sleep flawlessly, or as close to flawlessly as it gets. And then you do it again. Now, maybe you add the next 5 minutes of what now would be a 10-minute exercise or 10-minute presentation. You just take the second 5 minutes, do it again. Take the third 5 minutes, do it again. Do that 5 times. You now have a 25-minute presentation. Now you're right in the realm of legitimate professional keynote presentations. All of what I just described, if you do it this way, you will have a 25, 30-minute piece of gold within 4 months.
This is powerful, Nick. This is probably one of the most powerful challenges. We had some really amazing ones. But I am so with you. I'm going to take this challenge, because even if you think that you've already arrived with your talk, with your message, it's right, new level. Just do this, and you're going to take yourself you're never going to get stagnant. You're always going to take yourself to the next level. Love this exercise. This is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Fabulous. Okay, well, that's a wrap for Speak Pack today. You have brought so many insights to really marinate into for those emerging voices who really want to take their message out there to the globe, right, in a really impactful, powerful way. And we got to throw in some monetization in there, which is also what makes you sustainable, right? If you don't have that backing, then how can you do this long term? So thank you for sharing the wisdom that you've learned along the way with the Speak Pack audience.
Thank you, Antoniette. I appreciate the time. It's been great. Let's do it again sometime.
Yes, let's. All right. Ciao for now.
Thank you for listening to the Speak Packed podcast. To become a recommended speaker of Antoniette's WPC speaker agency, or you are a host or planner looking for a dynamic expert in optimized performance, Antoniette would like to personally meet with you. Secure a time with her at speakerbooker.com. Again, that is speakerbooker.com. It all begins with a vision, a voice, and a pact to impact. Join the Speak Packed movement by joining our new private Facebook group at the link in our show notes. Find us on nearly every social media platform at One Antoniette. That's number 1, ANTONIETTE, or simply hashtag SpeakPacked.